Officer Jenna had been part of the K-9 unit at Portland International Airport for 2 years now. Every day she walked the terminals with her partner, Arrow, a German shepherd whose intelligence and instincts made him one of the best. Arrow wasn't just any dog. He had special skills in behavioral assessment, a rare talent for detecting human stress and emotions long before any trouble began. Their bond was something deeper than just handler and dog. It was built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared purpose: to keep the airport safe. Jenna had learned to read Arrow's subtle movements and signals: a twitch of his ear, a shift in his posture, a sudden stillness. These were all his ways of telling her that something was off. The two of them had been through countless patrols together. Nothing seemed to surprise them anymore. People rushing to catch flights, families struggling with crying children, the usual chaos of the airport. They had seen it all. But today, things would be different. As they walked past the gates, Jenna couldn't help but feel the weight of the day pressing down on her. The terminal was more crowded than usual. Passengers hurried past, each absorbed in their own little world. But Arrow, her ever-observant partner, wasn't distracted. His eyes moved from face to face, scanning the crowd. "Everything okay, Arrow?" Jenna muttered under her breath, a routine question. But there was something in his gaze that made her stop. Arrow had slowed his pace just a fraction. His focus had shifted and his ears were slightly forward, a sign that something wasn't right. She felt it too. An unusual energy in the air. It was as though the world around them was holding its breath. Jenna stopped, her hand instinctively resting on Arrow's harness. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Arrow didn't move. He just stood there, his dark eyes locked on something ahead. There was a man in the distance holding a baby in his arms. The man's appearance was ordinary, tired, worn out and disheveled. But Arrow's intense stare told her that this wasn't just a random encounter. Something was off. "Let's check it out," Jenna murmured to herself as her hand reached for her radio. She trusted Arrow's instincts more than anything. And right now, those instincts were screaming that she needed to pay attention. As they walked closer, Jenna's heart started to race. The man was swaying slightly, his hands trembling as he held the baby close. The child's cries were sharp, desperate, not the usual sounds of a tired baby, but something more. "Sir," Jenna called, trying to sound calm, but she could hear the underlying tension in her voice. "I need you to stay right there." The man turned to face her, his eyes wide with panic. His grip tightened around the baby and he spoke quickly. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just need to get to my gate, please. I'm not a threat." Jenna took another step forward, her mind racing. Arrow's alertness had only grown, and Jenna could feel it too. Something wasn't right. Something was happening, and she had no idea what it was. But as she stood there, ready to act, one thought crossed her mind. Today was going to be anything but ordinary. This was the moment that would test everything she had learned and every bond she had forged with Arrow. The airport was buzzing with activity. Travelers rushed through the terminals, their minds focused on the hustle of catching flights, grabbing coffee, or just getting from one place to another. The noise was overwhelming, but it was the kind of background noise Jenna had learned to tune out after years of patrolling the busy airport with Arrow. But then, something shifted. Arrow, her faithful German shepherd, stopped. His ears pricked, up. His muscles tensed. Jenna instinctively paused, her hand already reaching for his harness. Something was wrong. Arrow's usual calm demeanor was gone. His stance was rigid, his gaze locked onto something across the terminal. And then, it happened. The bark. It wasn't just any bark. It wasn't the controlled, routine alert Jenna was used to hearing during training. This was sharp. It was urgent, and it echoed throughout the terminal, making every head turn in their direction. People froze, looking around in confusion, unsure of where the sound had come from or why. Jenna's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't normal. "Arrow, what is it?" Jenna muttered under her breath, but the dog didn't break his focus. He barked, again the sound piercing through the usual chaos, causing a ripple of alarm to spread among the passengers. She looked in the direction he was staring, and there he was, a man standing near the windows, clutching a baby in his arms. His hands were shaking, his face pale, and his body swayed as if trying to balance both himself and the baby. The baby's cries pierced the air, louder, sharper than any sound Jenna had ever heard in an airport. But it wasn't just the crying that caught her attention. It was the desperation in the man's eyes. Something about the whole scene felt off. Jenna stepped forward, instincts kicking in. Arrow's bark had drawn attention from everyone around them, but her focus was entirely on the man and the baby. As she moved closer, the tension in the air thickened. Her hand was still on Arrow's harness, feeling his muscles coiled, ready to act. "Sir," Jenna called, her voice calm but with an edge of authority. "Please stay right there." The man's head snapped toward her, and his eyes were wide with panic. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said quickly, his voice barely audible. Over the baby's cries. I just need to get to my gate, please don't." Jenna's gaze shifted to the baby, whose tiny body was racked with sobs. Something was very wrong. Arrow had sensed it, and now Jenna had to act. The sound of Arrow's bark still rang in her ears, and she knew this was just the beginning of something bigger. The man's appearance immediately struck Jenna. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his eyes wide with panic. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, maybe longer. Sweat dripped down his forehead despite the cold air inside the terminal. His hands, shaking uncontrollably, gripped the baby in his arms as though he was trying to hold on to something, anything before it slipped away. The baby, a small bundle wrapped in a worn-out blanket, was crying loudly, but it wasn't the kind of cry you hear from a tired child or one with a wet diaper. No. This cry was desperate. It was filled with pain, fear, a deep, primal terror that made Jenna's heart skip a beat. Every cry felt like a plea for help, like the baby knew something was terribly wrong. Jenna could feel her pulse quicken. Her training kicked in. She had to remain calm. Arrow, who had been at her side, was now moving closer, his body stiff. His instincts were on high alert, just like hers. The tension in the air was palpable. The terminal, once filled with the noise of hurrying travelers, seemed to fall into a heavy silence around them, all eyes now fixed on the man and his child. "Sir?" Jenna called, her voice calm but firm. She took another cautious step forward. "Please stay right there." The man's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto hers. The fear in his gaze was enough to make anyone pause. He didn't respond right away. His hands tightened around the baby as though he was trying to protect it from some unseen threat. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said quickly, his voice cracking under the pressure. I just need to get to my gate. Please." His voice trailed off, filled with desperation. Sweat continued to pour down his face, his body swaying slightly as if he was about to collapse. But something in Jenna's gut told her that this wasn't just a man who was late for his flight. This wasn't the usual airport panic. There was something deeper here, something darker. Jenna took another step forward, but Arrow, ever the vigilant partner, stepped ahead of her. His sharp eyes never left the man. Jenna's heart raced, knowing this was a delicate moment. She had to be careful. "Sir, I need you to stop and let me help you," Jenna said, her voice softer now, trying to break through his panic. But the man only flinched and gripped the baby tighter, his body trembling harder. Jenna's instincts screamed that she needed to act, but she couldn't yet understand the full picture. She glanced at Arrow, who was now standing still, watching the man with a steady gaze, his body coiled in readiness. She knew Arrow's instincts well. He wasn't just reacting to a simple situation. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And in that moment, Jenna knew that this wasn't going to be a simple call for assistance. This was something bigger. Jenna moved, closer, her heart pounding in her chest. The baby's cries grew louder, more desperate, piercing through the air like a knife. As she knelt down to get a better look, something caught her eye. The baby's leg, exposed beneath the worn blanket. It was bruised. Not just a little mark, but deep, dark bruises like someone had gripped the tiny leg too tightly. Jenna's stomach churned. Her years of experience told her that these weren't just the signs of a tired, overwhelmed parent. No, this was something else. Something far more sinister. She could feel the air around her grow heavier. Arrow stood, at attention beside her, his posture tense. The dog was still watching the man, but his gaze seemed to soften ever so slightly, as if he too sensed the deep pain beneath the surface. The bruise on the baby's leg was a silent scream, a cry for help that couldn't be voiced. Jenna swallowed hard. She had seen her fair share of disturbing situations, but this was different. This wasn't just a lost father trying to catch a flight. This was something worse. The baby's body language was all wrong. Fear, pain, and distress radiated from every cry, every tremble. "Sir," Jenna said gently, her voice strained but controlled. She had to keep him calm. "I need you to let me help you. I need you to show me what's going on." But as Jenna's eyes flicked to the bruises, the man's face changed. His eyes, filled with panic just moments ago, were now clouded with something else. Guilt. No, it wasn't guilt. It was anguish. Pure, raw anguish. He tightened his grip on the baby, his arms shaking as he tried to protect the child from something. Jenna wasn't sure what. I didn't do this." The man's voice broke. His words were rushed, a tangled mess of fear and desperation. "I didn't hurt him. Please, I just need help. I just need to get him somewhere safe." Jenna felt a knot tighten in her throat. The way he spoke wasn't the voice of a guilty man. It wasn't the voice of someone who was trying to cover up something. No, it was the voice of someone who had reached the edge. Someone who was desperate, scared, and trying to protect the child from whatever had pushed him to the breaking point. "Though," man's eyes met Jenna's, and for a moment everything else faded away. It wasn't just the bruises that spoke to her now. It was his face. The fear, the worry, the helplessness. It was all there. Jenna's instincts screamed at her to act. But what was really happening here? Was the child truly in danger? Or was the man just caught in a desperate situation that had spiraled beyond control? Arrow's stance remained unyielding, but his gaze softened, as if waiting for Jenna to make the next move. Jenna's heart was heavy with the weight of what she had to do. But one thing was clear, this situation was far from simple. Jenna took a step back, her heart racing. Arrow remained still at her side, his eyes locked on Ryan, who was still holding the baby close to his chest. The cries of Luca had softened, but the tension in the air was palpable. Jenna knew she needed to get to the bottom of this. Whatever was happening, it was more than just a man with a crying child. She had to understand what was really going on. Ryan's breath was shallow, his hands trembling as they clutched the baby. His face was pale, drawn with exhaustion and fear. His eyes flickered from the baby to Jenna, and in that moment Jenna saw it. He wasn't just scared. He was desperate. "I didn't do this," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper, shaking his head. His eyes welled up with tears, and for a moment Jenna could see the raw pain in his face. "I didn't hurt him. Please. I just had to get him out of there." The words hit Jenna like a ton of bricks. She took another step closer, trying to keep her voice calm. "Ryan, what's going on?" she asked gently. She could see the weight of the world in his eyes, but there was something more, something he wasn't saying. Ryan hesitated for a moment, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "It's my sister," he said, his voice cracking. "Her name's Kylie. She's been using for a while now. Started with prescription painkillers, but it got worse. Way worse." Jenna's heart sank as she listened. She knew the signs of addiction. She had seen it before. But this was different. This wasn't just about a parent struggling to make it through the day. This was about a child caught in the crossfire of a battle much bigger than anyone had expected. She's been using heroin," Ryan continued, his voice trembling. "I tried everything. Rehab, interventions, I even called social services a few times, but it never stuck. And now it's like She's lost herself completely. And Luca, he's the one paying for it. The tears began to flow freely down Ryan's face now. I can't let her hurt him anymore. I had to get him out of there. I had to protect him. Jenna's mind raced as Ryan spoke. She had always known addiction could tear families apart. But hearing it like this, the desperation in his voice made everything feel even more real. This wasn't just a case of a parent neglecting their child. This was life or death protection. But why run? Jenna asked softly. Why didn't you just call the police? Ryan looked at her, his eyes filled with confusion and pain. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't want him to end up in the system, not like that. He's my nephew. He deserves better. I thought if I could just get him out of there, maybe I could fix it, maybe I could give him a chance. Jenna took a deep breath, trying to process it all. Ryan hadn't come here to cause trouble. He had come here to save Luca. But everything had spiraled out of control, and now she was standing in the middle of it, caught between what was right and what was necessary. I couldn't let her do this to him, Ryan whispered again, almost to himself. Jenna looked at Arrow, who stood quietly beside her, his eyes still trained on Ryan and Luca. The dog, usually so focused on threats, seemed to sense the confusion and the pain. Jenna knew one thing for sure. This wasn't a situation she could solve alone. It wasn't just about following protocol. This was about saving a life. And Jenna had to figure out what to do next. Ryan's hands shook as he cradled the baby tighter, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Jenna could feel the tension building, but she stayed silent, waiting for him to speak. He had already shared so much, but the truth was still unraveling. His voice was barely audible as he began to explain the chaos of the morning. Luca, he was crying. I couldn't get him to stop, but when I walked in, I saw her. Ryan's voice cracked. She was holding him out the window. Jenna's heart skipped a beat, her stomach tightening in disbelief. What? She asked, barely able to process his words. Ryan's eyes welled with tears, his breath shaky. She was holding him by his legs outside the window like it was some kind of joke. Laughing, just laughing like nothing was wrong. He paused, his face filled with a mixture of horror and pain. Luca. He was screaming. I knew I had to do something. The silence between them stretched and Jenna's mind raced. She tried to imagine the scene he was describing, but she couldn't. A mother holding her baby out of a window? The thought was too horrible to comprehend. Ryan's hands trembled as he continued. She just kept saying things like, maybe if you stop crying, I'll pull you back inside. She was laughing, Jenna. She wasn't even thinking about what she was doing. It wasn't funny. It wasn't a game. It was dangerous. Jenna's chest tightened. She had seen the effects of addiction before, how it twisted minds and lives. But this was something darker, more terrifying. Kylie's actions weren't just neglect. They were reckless and dangerous. I couldn't just stand there and let her do that, Ryan whispered. I couldn't. Jenna nodded slowly, her thoughts spinning. Ryan wasn't just taking Luca away from his mother, he was saving him. But Jenna couldn't ignore the fact that he had taken Luca without permission. The law said that was kidnapping. But was it? Was he a rescuer or a criminal? Ryan wiped his face, his voice cracking as he spoke again. I grabbed Luca, pulled him inside, and shoved Kylie away from the window. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to hurt her. But she wasn't herself. She wasn't thinking. Jenna's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Her job was to enforce the law, to protect people. But in this moment, it was hard to know who needed protection more, the child or the man who had just risked everything to save him. What happened next? Jenna asked, her voice softer now as she tried to piece together the full story. Ryan's shoulders sagged. I grabbed what I could for Luca, and I ran. I just ran. I didn't know where to go. But I knew I couldn't leave him there. Jenna felt a pang of sympathy for Ryan, but the gravity of the situation was clear. Ryan, you know you can't just take him like that. There are rules. I know. Ryan interrupted, his voice shaky. I know, but I had no choice. I couldn't leave him there, I couldn't. Not after what she did. Jenna was silent for a moment, trying to make sense of everything. Was Ryan really in the wrong here? Or was he a man who did what needed to be done to save a child? The reality was Jenna wasn't sure anymore. But one thing was clear. This story wasn't over yet. Jenna stood there, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her. Ryan's story was heartbreaking, but it didn't make the decisions any easier. He wasn't a criminal, not in her eyes. But there were procedures, laws to follow. She had to call for backup, no matter how much her instincts told her Ryan was the last person who needed to be arrested today. Stay right here, Jenna said to Ryan, her voice steady but firm. She didn't want to leave him alone, but she needed to get the situation under control. I'm calling for backup. Ryan nodded, his face a mix of relief and fear. Please, just help him. Jenna called over a nearby TSA agent, her voice low but urgent. I need an investigation started. Something's wrong here, and I need to figure out what happened. The agent nodded, already pulling out his radio to initiate a deeper search. As Jenna waited, her eyes kept returning to Ryan, who was pacing nervously, still cradling Luca against him. The baby had stopped crying, but his little body was still tense, his wide eyes scanning the room. Then there was Arrow. The dog, who had been on high alert since they first encountered Ryan, had now calmed down. He wasn't tense or rigid anymore. Instead, Arrow stood next to Ryan, his posture softening. The change in Arrow's behavior struck Jenna. She had seen the dog react to danger, to discomfort, but never like this. He wasn't sensing a threat. He was watching over Ryan and Luca, standing as if to protect them without any sign of aggression. Jenna took a slow breath, her hand resting gently on Arrow's head. What are you telling me, boy? She muttered under her breath, trying to make sense of it all. If Arrow trusted Ryan, maybe there was something more to his story than she had first understood. But she couldn't make any decisions yet. She needed the whole truth. The TSA agent quickly gathered a small team, and they started checking Ryan's claims. As they pieced together the story, it became clear that Kylie's apartment was a disaster. The agent returned with the first report, his face grim. Jenna, the TSA agent called out, you need to see this. Jenna followed him to the back of the terminal, where a team had gathered around a laptop. They were pulling up pictures of the apartment. The scene was disturbing. Filthy floors, broken furniture, and the unmistakable signs of a dangerous environment. It wasn't just neglect. It was complete disregard for safety. Dried formula bottles, dirty diapers, and a crib that looked more like a storage unit than a place for a baby to sleep. Jenna felt her stomach turn. God, she whispered, her heart heavy with the realization. Luca's life hadn't just been difficult. It had been at risk every single day. But it was the next image that shook her. The baby's room, or what was supposed to be a room, was covered with stains. There was evidence of drug use, empty pill bottles, syringes. Jenna couldn't breathe for a moment. This wasn't just about a mother struggling with addiction. This was a place where a child was being neglected, abused, and left to suffer. Turning back to Ryan, Jenna's heart ached. He hadn't just taken Luca from an unfit environment, he had saved him. The truth about Luca's life had just come into sharp focus, and it was worse than anything Jenna could have imagined. Jenna took another look at Arrow, who was still beside Ryan. The dog's calm demeanor was no accident. Arrow had seen something in Ryan. Maybe it wasn't about the rules or the law, it was about protecting this child. Ryan, Jenna said, stepping forward, I believe you. I'll make sure Luca gets the help he needs. But we still have a long road ahead. Ryan nodded, tears welling up in his eyes as he looked down at the baby in his arms. The search for the truth had only just begun. Jenna paced back and forth, waiting for the updates. Her mind was a whirlwind. Ryan's words echoed in her head, and her heart ached for Luca, but nothing could prepare her for the truth that was about to surface. The door to the office opened, and the TSA agent walked in, his face grim. "Jenna," he said, his voice low. "You need to see this." Jenna followed him quickly down the hallway, the tension in her chest growing with every step. They reached a small room where the team had gathered. A computer screen flickered to life, and images of Kylie's apartment filled the screen. It was worse than Jenna had imagined. Broken furniture, rotting food, filthy walls. It was like a scene from a nightmare. The apartment wasn't just unfit for a child. It was a danger zone. There were signs of neglect everywhere. Mold on the walls, dirty diapers scattered around the room, empty bottles of alcohol. But it was the next picture that made Jenna's blood run cold. Luca's room, or what passed for a room, was exposed. On the screen. His crib, if you could call it that, was filthy, covered in soiled bedding. Jenna's stomach churned. And there, beside the crib, were ropes and strips of tape. It was clear now. Luca hadn't just been neglected. He had been restrained. "That's not just neglect," Jenna whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "That's abuse." Dr. Patricia Kellerman, a pediatrician specializing in child abuse cases, stepped into the room. Her face was solemn as she reviewed the images. "The child has been severely malnourished," Dr. Kellerman said, turning to face Jenna. "Dehydrated, and these bruises." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "They were caused by physical restraint. This child has been suffering for a long time." Jenna felt her chest tighten. The weight of the situation hit her all at once. Luca, just a baby, had been living in an environment that was nothing short of a prison. The terror he must have felt every day. It was too much to imagine. Her heart broke for him. As Dr. Kellerman continued to explain the severity of Luca's condition, Jenna's thoughts flashed to Ryan. He had seen the signs. He had been the one to save Luca, even if it meant breaking the law. Without him, Jenna knew Luca might not have survived much longer in that apartment. "His life was in grave danger," Dr. Kellerman said softly, her voice filled with compassion. "But you got him out in time." Jenna looked down at her shoes, her mind spinning. How had it come to this? How had Kylie, a mother, let her child suffer like this? The answers were clear, but they only left her feeling more helpless. Ryan's actions, though controversial, were beginning to make sense. He wasn't just a man on the run. He was a hero, doing whatever it took to get Luca out of that hellhole. And now, Jenna understood just how much he had risked. Luca's life was on the line, and thanks to Ryan, there was still hope for him. Jenna turned back to Ryan, who was sitting with Luca in the corner of the terminal, his eyes red from exhaustion. Jenna's heart softened. Ryan's sacrifice had already started to pay off. And maybe, just maybe, Luca's story wasn't over. Jenna stood at the edge of the security office, her eyes watching Ryan as he sat with Luca, the baby now wrapped in a soft, clean blanket. It was a quiet moment, one that felt miles away from the chaos of the day. The relief was visible in Ryan's eyes, but there was still a weight in his expression. Jenna knew he was far from being free of the storm that had torn through his life. His actions, which had once seemed reckless, were now understood. The system had taken Luca into emergency custody, but not as a criminal act. Ryan had risked everything to save him, and now it was starting to show. The officers and social workers who had first looked at him with suspicion now saw him for what he truly was, a man desperate to save his family. "Jenna," a voice called from behind her. It was Sergeant Mills. "We've reviewed the evidence." Ryan's actions, while not legal, are being viewed in a different light. His intention was to protect Luca. Jenna nodded, her eyes never leaving Ryan. "He did what he had to do. I saw it the moment I met him." Mills paused. "He's not going to face serious charges, but there's still a lot of work to do before he can have full custody." Jenna's heart softened. It was clear that Ryan's path to redemption wouldn't be easy, but it was now within reach. For so long he had been a man on the run, carrying the weight of his decisions. But now, with Luca in safe hands, Ryan could begin to rebuild his life. The door to the office opened, and Arrow walked in, his eyes immediately locking onto Ryan. The dog had been calm since the moment they arrived. But now, as he moved toward Ryan and Luca, Jenna saw a shift in him. Arrow's behavior had always been a reflection of the truth. His instincts never lied. And now, as Arrow nuzzled against Ryan's leg, it was clear. Arrow approved. He had seen the truth from the beginning. Ryan looked down at the dog, his face softening into a smile. "You trust me, don't you?" he whispered, as if to himself. Arrow's tail wagged gently, a silent affirmation. Jenna watched the exchange, her heart aching with the quiet intensity of the moment. It was as if Ryan's redemption had been written in those small, almost imperceptible actions, the way he held Luca, the way he spoke to him, and now, how he interacted with Arrow. The transformation in him was undeniable. He had started as a man on the verge of losing everything, but now, with Luca's safety assured, Ryan was becoming something more. He was becoming a father, a protector. As Luca's condition stabilized and his cries grew quieter, Jenna couldn't help but feel a sense of hope rising within her. This was far from over, but Ryan had made the hardest decision of his life, and now, it seemed like the world was beginning to see him for the hero he was. He wasn't a criminal. He was a man who loved his family so deeply that he was willing to break the law to save them. And in that moment, with Arrow standing beside him, Jenna saw the miracle she had been waiting for. A broken man had become the very thing he had always dreamed of being, a protector. "Keep going, Ryan," she whispered to herself, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. Months had passed since that day at the airport, and the change in Luca was nothing short of miraculous. The once malnourished, frightened child was now thriving. He was sitting up on his own, his eyes shining with curiosity. His laughter, once a rarity, had become a constant soundtrack in Ryan's apartment. Jenna couldn't help but smile when she thought about how far Luca had come. No one had expected this kind of progress after the trauma he had endured, but here he was, growing, learning, and living in a way that seemed impossible just months ago. Ryan, too, had transformed. The man who had once been consumed with fear and uncertainty was now a confident father, devoted to Luca's well-being. Their bond was unbreakable, stronger than any blood connection. Ryan had learned what it meant to be a father, to give everything for the one person who needed him the most. His love for Luca was clear in every small action, whether it was helping Luca take his first steps or simply holding him close when the world seemed overwhelming. One evening, as Jenna sat at her desk, she received an unexpected envelope. It was from Ryan. Her curiosity piqued, she opened it and read the invitation. "Dear Jenna, you have been a part of this journey, and I wanted to share something special with you. Please join us to celebrate Luca's first birthday. It's a small gathering, but it means the world to us. You'll always be a part of our family. With gratitude, Ryan and Luca." Jenna's eyes filled with emotion as she read the words. She couldn't believe how much had changed since she first met Ryan. He had come to her as a man in crisis, struggling to protect his nephew. And now, months later, he was thriving as the father he never thought he could be. On the day of the party, Jenna arrived at Ryan's apartment, her heart swelling with pride. The little apartment, once filled with uncertainty, was now filled with laughter and warmth. Ryan had done it. He had built a home for Luca. And Arrow, the dog who had played such an important role in the beginning, was right there by their side, still watching over the family, as if he knew exactly what he had helped create. "Hey, Jenna," Ryan called from the door, his face lighting up as he saw her. "You made it. Thank you for coming." Luca, now a chunky 1-year-old, was in Ryan's arms, his giggles filling the room. Jenna bent down to say hello to the baby, her heart melting when Luca reached for her with his chubby little hands. "You've done it, Ryan," Jenna said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You're an amazing father." Ryan smiled, his eyes brimming with tears. "I never thought I could be, but here we are." He looked down at Luca, then back at Jenna. "And I couldn't have done it without you." Arrow walked up to them, nudging Ryan's hand. The dog's presence was a constant reminder of how far they had come. Arrow had known from the beginning. He had trusted Ryan when no one else did. And now, as he sat at Ryan's feet, it was clear that he too had become a part of this family. As the party continued, Jenna watched the family she had helped protect grow stronger. Luca, with his first birthday cake smeared all over his face, looked up at Ryan with such joy. And in that moment, Jenna knew the love Ryan had for Luca and the bond they shared was unbreakable. It had been a long, hard journey, but now there was healing and hope. The beginning of a new chapter for Ryan, Luca, and even Arrow. A chapter filled with love, growth, and the promise of a future that once seemed impossible.